So this is knee deep in the middle of putting on a new belt, new clutch, and new idler pulley on a 44-inch Pro XL model DR field and brush cutter. To get down in here, you got to remove a lot of 9/16 bolts. You'll pull this front cover off, which brings the fuel tank and all this off, this is an aftermarket fuel tank. I had to replace the factory plastic one that cracked on me. But there's several brackets. You'll pull all them off. You'll have to get the engine up and tilt it back to be able to reach the crankshaft bolt that holds the clutch on. The crankshaft bolt is right there. A little bit of Loctite. I hit it with a Milwaukee M12 half-inch impact and it came right off. But yeah, since we're in the middle of this, I wanted to walk you through replacing the belt, idler pulley, and clutch on this DR field and brush cutter. Let's look at some of the parts we're going to replace here. So first and foremost, I knew the original clutch was not working correctly. The blades were not coming up to speed as they should. And anyways, we've got a replacement unit here from Extreme Outdoor Power Equipment. It's got some upgrades inside of it, more clutch holding capacity, a much nicer pulley, much nicer bearings. Overall, very well built, way more heavy duty than the factory DR power unit. Now, one thing to note here is you're going to have to go out, at least on this clutch, you'll have to go out and get yourself some Woodruff Keys. These are 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch by 1.5, because on the DR unit from the factory, it has a key machined in. However, on these outdoor power equipment, extreme outdoor power equipment replacement units, it's more of a traditional where the slot is machined into the bearing. So I'm going to cut this down to about 1 inch to match the same length as that, and we'll get that installed later. Now, if we take a look here at the idler pulleys, I actually didn't know that I had an idler pulley going bad. Oh, this one has definitely seen better days. Also, a bit of a design flaw, I think, on DR's part of when you wash your mower deck off, it allows water to get down inside of this pulley and just sit. Not sure if I'll be able to address that or have a remedy for it, but this is a new flat idler pulley, 4-inch, part number 151271. They're labeled Generac parts now since Generac bought out DR. But also, last but not least, we've got a nice new Kevlar belt here. The belt part number is B49, Bravo 49. So yeah, we're going to throw on a new idler pulley, new clutch, and new belt. But first, we got to get this Woodruff key, crankshaft key, cut down to 1 inch. I'm going to cut it off now using just a generic rotary cutoff tool, Dremel knockoff, with a cutoff wheel. I've measured it 1 inch. Got my mark right there. And always make sure you're using some gloves and safety glasses in my case over the glasses ones, because I wear glasses. Now that we've made our cut, we kept it pretty square. However, we want to file down the edges, make sure we don't have any burrs. And I think that'll work. Now, before we come in here and install it, obviously you want to take note of this warning sticker here. They want you to use a torque wrench. Don't use an impact gun to reinstall. In the manual, they give you some torque specs. It's around 40 foot-pounds. And I'll also check system voltage. I've already checked my battery. My battery's got good voltage, so we should be good to go and not voiding any warranties. But we're going to take our Woodruff key, crankshaft key, whatever you want to call it. It's kind of hard to see because of the way the motor is currently rotated, but back here on the back side, that's where my crankshaft slot is at. So we're just going to make sure that our key fits in it and down in the clutch pulley slot. And then we'll slide this clutch pulley up and on. It'll actually go in here in that orientation. And this slot right here that is machined into the top plate of the clutch assembly will fit over this little notch. And that's just to keep the clutch from rotating. So we'll get that installed now. And one thing to mention before we get started here, got a little dab of grease. Gonna grease up that crankshaft slot as well as the inside of the new clutch. Alright, appears we got it all the way in. Then you can come in with your bolt. If I can get it started, there it goes. And we'll get this tightened down and get a torque wrench over here and properly torque it. A little bit of installation instructions that came with this from Extreme Outdoor Power Equipment. Looks like they recommend, based on your bolt size, different torque ranges. They've got anywhere from 40 up to 55 foot-pounds based on your graded bolt and your bolt size. I'm going with 50 foot-pounds, and that fastener is a 5/8. So I'm going to use a 1/2-inch drive 5/8 socket. So if we look back here on the top side of the engine, got your flywheel cover. This pops off with some little tabs. We're going to remove a Phillips head. Alright, this comes off. Now we've got 4 fasteners holding on this little cover shroud. I'm going to use an 8mm. Actually removed 3, left 1 in, spun that out of the way. Now we can get in here on this flywheel bolt, provide some counter torque to be able to properly torque that crank bolt on the bottom side. See what size this flywheel nut is. Probably over 1 inch. Looks like it's going to be about 1 1.25 inches. 1 1/4 inch socket on a 2-foot breaker bar, 3/4 drive. There we go. 50 foot-pounds. Now one more thing to do here with the clutch. This is our power lead. It's got to feed up through this oval shaped hole. It's in the underside of the engine mounting plate. It is a tight fit. It's almost like they intend for you to get it through and not be able to pull it back out, but just pop that through there. And as luck would have it, the cheap connector, because of the poor design from the Extreme Outdoor Power Equipment clutch assembly, that connector, its overall outside dimensions are larger than that oval slot that it has to feed through. That's where the factory connector fed through. So of course when you try to force it through, connector cracks. Now there is a workaround here. We'll just pull the leads out of the connector, feed the leads through, put some bullet connectors on, crimp it, heat shrink it, and keep on trucking. So now before we bolt the engine back in place, we're gonna go ahead and put our idler pulley bracket back in there. You can kind of see there's a hole back there. We're gonna get this in place, get the idler pulley stacked up. There's a couple nuts that go back on top of this, and we'll get that in place, put the spring back on, and then worry about getting our engine bolted back down and then routing our new belt properly. We've got the idler pulley arm installed. This is our new pulley. We showed the part number earlier. Put a little bit of grease down in there, and then we've also got some grease and some anti-seize there on top of that bolt. But we're just going to drop it on top, and then we'll have to get us a wrench underneath the bottom and put the 2 nuts on top, because the order goes a nut, spring, and another nut on top. So we'll show that when we're done. We've got the idler pulley back installed. As you can see, you actually have a few nuts you have to stack up here. The bolt comes up and through. You have one nut to hold the idler pulley onto the idler pulley arm. Then you put a second nut on top. Then you put your idler pulley spring, and then the third nut keeps the idler pulley spring where it should be. And we're gonna now work to get the engine dropped back down into its correct orientation, get it bolted down, and then I'll have my buddy hold the idler pulley where it should be. We'll feed the belt through, and then when you release the idler pulley, it'll press up against the belt and get the correct belt tension. We've now routed the new B49. That's the number of the belt. It's a nice Kevlar belt. We've got it routed around. You'll have to turn the belt sideways, like lay it on its back here to fit it underneath the crankshaft pulley. That's the only way to fit through that small space. And then if you got a friend handy, have them pull the idler pulley here to my right, and it'll really easily fit up in here, roll around the blade pulley, and then just let the idler pulley return, and it'll keep your tension like it should be. But now we just need to put the protective covers and the fuel tank and all that stuff back on, and it'll be ready to go. We'll show that when it's done. And on the back side of the engine, we do have a little bit of hardware here. So this flange nut, that's going to be for connecting our starter solenoid lead back to the starter. We'll get that back on. And then also we've got a little, I think that's an 8 or 10 millimeter, maybe 5/16, that we'll put back on right here. And that's where we'll connect our two grounds. And while we're here on the side, we need to remember, as I talked about earlier, the connector was broken. So we added some little bullet connectors, and we'll connect these up. And that'll make sure our PTO clutch engages when we flip the switch. We got it all put back together. All the protective covers are back on. Clutch plugged in, grounds connected, ignition connected, and that should be about it.